everybody. This is Eric Axelrod from MaxMRR and Building No-Code Apps. And I'm here today with Reece Lyons, founder of Sendpilot and GoodWebinar. And we're here with Reece talking about how he got started with no-code and and we want to talk through the process of exactly how he got started and kind of what made him choose no-code and all of the things that, all of the burning questions that everybody's really asking. So feel free to introduce yourself, Reece, and then we'll get started.
Yeah, hi, thank you. Thank you for having me, guys. So obviously my name is Reece Lyons, founder and CEO of Sendpilot first, then we're now launching another no-code app called GoodWebinar. So really excited to talk about that a bit later. But yeah, I started off, well, we'll touch upon it in a minute, but I started off, on the design side and then moved into no-code and kind of spiraled out of control from there into launching SaaS companies all over the place. So yeah, really excited to be on.
Awesome. Thank you, Reece. So to jump right in, so how exactly did you get started with no code? What led you down this path?
Yeah, so I've always been more of a design background. So I started off on WordPress. The first company I ever built was first year of university. I built a social network that helped entrepreneurs and startup founders and investors connect. It's kind of like Facebook for entrepreneurs.
And you built that on WordPress?
We built that on WordPress, which was a nightmare. There was no code using that, actually, believe it or not. We just used WordPress plugins. We hacked stuff together, Frankenstein style, to basically build this full-scale social network, which worked really well. But that was the first real software-y side to my business career, I suppose. Closed that down, couldn't scale it. We were competing with Facebook groups and all that stuff, so we just thought, forget it, we'll move on. Then I focused more on website design. So I would cold call people, which I hated doing, and I'd try and sell them a website, and I had no idea how to cold call. So that was just a big, sweaty, horrible mess of me sitting there ringing up people that didn't want to speak to me, trying to flog them a website. That didn't work. Then I moved on to really focusing on, aspects of design and user interface and all that kind of thing. And that's where I really started to begin the journey into no code. I think just before that, I started teaching myself Python, JavaScript, and some front end coding as well, which I kind of got the hang of, but I realized I wasn't actually interested in the building blocks. I was more interested in the, selling the house as opposed to the individual bricks and mastering all that. So I then came across Bubble, which I think I discovered it just over a year ago now. And when I first sort of stepped in, it was kind of a learning curve. Mm-hmm. And anyone using it will probably find the same thing. If they're just starting, there's a little bit of a learning curve, trying to understand the fundamentals, database structure, all that sort of thing.
User interface.
Exactly, yeah. And things are always changing. It's a really powerful and interesting product. And then once I taught myself a little bit, I could then build something really basic, and then I learned a little bit more, and I'd keep building and building and building until I basically mastered, everything that I needed to build all these apps that I wanted, and web apps. And that's when I really took the plunge into developing software as a service company, so SaaS companies. Mm. First thing I built on Bubble was a project management platform, which basically was like Asana, Trello, InVision, all built into one platform. Mm-hmm. I had no idea how to sell it. I'd built this thing, it was designed well, no idea how to sell it. So I ended up, after having a small team of two, I brought someone on. I ended up just selling it as a template to one of the template guys, and just seeing what happens. So that was the first real venture into it, and then obviously I went from there.
Now, did anything ever happen with that? Did anybody ever turn it into anything?
So I actually sold it to an individual who wanted to run it as his own business. I think he took it down, so I don't think he ever got around to doing it, but that was the first acquisition, I suppose. I mean, it was next to nothing. I think I sold it for about $1,100 or something. All
right. So you have one exit under your belt.
Yeah. I mean, if you could call it that. Yeah. I mean, it was tiny, but it was the first time I'd had that experience of building something and then just selling it on.
That sounds like something that's your LinkedIn profile.
That is on my LinkedIn profile. Oh yeah, I use the word brackets acquired in the middle. You've got put a little bit of ego behind it, otherwise, there's no point. $1,200.
Three times fast founder, a SaaS founder, one exit, and
yeah, just put that on everything on Angel.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Very cool. And so, kind of my next question that I was going to ask is about, like, what was the turning point that realized you could be a maker? So, like, going back to the very, very beginning, since your first app was WordPress and you didn't, it's like, what led you to that? Like, I'm going to build this. We can do this, right?
Yeah, I think it was the sudden realization. There's a real freedom around being able to, especially when you master Bubble, there's a real freedom around that. Where previously I would have had an idea, I'd have come up with a concept, and then I'd have had to try and find the WordPress plugins to fit in with it and piece everything together. Whereas with Bubble, there's another great no-code platform called DropSource as well, which is for native iOS and Android apps. A little bit different to Bubble, which we can maybe touch upon. But once you master that platform, you kind of go from having the idea to just being able to go, I'm going to build an MVP straight away, spend a few nights building something that looks really bad but works, testing it, and it's such a freedom to be able to do that, and in such a rapid time compared to a traditional development cycle. Mm-hmm. That's what got me really excited and got me into this stage now where obviously I've launched this Sendpilot, and I've got that bug, and everyone will get it. If this bug of just as soon as an idea comes in, they'll have to build it, because there's no barriers to entry really. There's literally no barriers. Once you've got everything under your belt, you can build anything.
And so that kind of leads to an unrelated question about focus, and that really doesn't have anything to do with no code, but it seems like that's kind of introducing a problem where if you've got this thing where you don't have any barriers, you don't have a filter, like what's stopping you from saying, I'm tired of working on this, I'm going to go work on this other thing now?
Yeah, I mean, for me, that happens all the time. What I sometimes do is I don't fight it, I just let it happen. So sometimes I might say, right, I'm just dropping everything, I'm going to build this idea. I won't launch it, but what I'll then do is I'll either probably, if it's good, I'll end up selling it to one of the template agencies, and they can pass it on to the community, sell it, whatever. There's a little bit of money behind that, just selling that. And it also, it's kind of quenched that creative thirst of the idea, you've done it, it looks great, but I'm not going to dedicate my whole life to it. I'll just sell it, make it whatever, $1,000 or whatever, and just give it to the community.
Of course, because that's the real problem, right?
Yes.
It's not the building. It's not the hard part. The hard part is selling it and scaling it.
Exactly. That's exactly it. Yeah, you can build anything. It's bringing it to market and making people want it, and developing it from there. That's the hard thing. Yeah.
Very cool. And then so like, especially at the beginning, surely you looked at some other things, some other apps you looked at, you're like, wow, this is amazing. How did they do this? And then you found out that it was a no code app. Like, what were some of those that you looked at?
Yeah. I think the first one that really caught my attention was an app called Treefort. I forget the developer's name, but I reached out to him and said, wow, amazing job on this. Really, really great. Because I found it through the Bubble forums. Mm-hmm. And that was where, I think that was the only production ready app that I saw. There was a lot of templates and stuff that people had created, but that was the real one where the design was really great. They had the landing page, they had the intercom widget, which just makes every site look a little bit more premium. I don't know how they do it. So that was the first one where I really thought, this is a commercial ready platform and a commercial ready app.
This is the real deal.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of stigma around it, and I was thinking, is this just the Wix for apps almost? And I think it comes down to the name of it, and that's just my opinion, obviously. But yeah, I mean, you can do so much with Bubble, and I think Treefort was the real app that got me into it.
Very cool. And then so you got into Bubble. How long did it really take you to learn from the get-go, to get off the ground and actually make something?
I'm trying to think back, because it was just over a year ago when I first started. I think it took me 3 months to be able to start to build a real app. A little bit longer to actually master and get, maybe 4 or 5 months before I really understood the user interface side. And then kind of from that 5-month period, I already had an app that was ready to go, and that was Oiga, which was my project management company. So I think 5 months was the total time, but it was a real progression. It wasn't like nothing, and suddenly everything. It was more building blocks and just building up to it. So I wouldn't be put off by that, that 5-month threshold. And when you think that's to be able to do the design, obviously the security Bubble kind of takes care of, and all the functionality as well, that 5-month period to be able to learn something and then build a ready to go app is pretty fast for any kind of development language.
Right. But that was basically like from the very beginning, not really having any experience in it to having something that was basically ready to launch. You took 4 or 5 months.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. 4 or 5 months. And I'd probably say by month 7 to 8, it was the best it was going to be. And that was when I started trying to sell it to people, like consumers, users. And then we found out that it wasn't, we needed like enterprise sales teams and all that sort of thing. So we just said, someone else can take it off my hands. So it's not a long,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so then the next question is, kind of about how did you actually execute it? So it sounds like you personally, as the founder, did a lot of the work. You didn't have to outsource it.
Nope. Yeah. So Sendpilot, I'll talk you through that. So Sendpilot is a content creation platform for social media companies. So we essentially automate the process of writing social media post content, images. We're able to turn your blog articles into a full social media campaign. We can introduce the content, all that sort of thing. And then the idea I was at work one day. I used to work for a tech company, not in a tech role, in a business role. And then the idea kind of came to me when we had this really inactive social media profile, but we had a very active blog. And I think I got the first MVP of Sendpilot up in one night. By that point, I'd kind of got the hang of Bubble. And it was the first time we had just an input, put the URL in, and then it would write all the posts and then push it to Buffer. And then the first time I saw it all push to Buffer, I basically just jumped up and cheered. It was very nerdy, very geeky in my room alone. But yeah, it was just such an amazing feeling to see that, everything worked. The APIs worked. It was all really, really cool. The post quality was really bad. And then since then we've really trying to perfect it. And, we're still working on that. Some people love it. Some people don't.
It's work in progress, right?
Yeah.
Just like the user interface, it can always be improved no matter how good it is.
Yeah, I mean, we've revised it 4 times now, the user interface for Sendpilot, and we're finally happy. People are happy with it, so we're sticking with that UI. Now it's just more about improvements to the actual AI side, I suppose you could say.
And then so on that note, so you didn't outsource any of it. You did it all yourself as a non-coder, right?
Yes. So I currently work with a fantastic Bubble developer who's more technical than me, called Nigel. We can link to his bio in the thing after.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I built the MVP, launched it, took it around, and then it came to a point where I needed to actually integrate directly with the networks and all this other stuff.
Right.
I didn't really know about, and I think I put a post out in the Bubble forums asking if anyone wanted to come on board as a CTO, as a Chief Technology Officer, for equity, which is, for any startups, a weird offer because at that point we had no value and there was no users. So Nigel really obviously saw the future of it, which is really great of him. Brought him in, and then he now heads up most of the really technical work, whereas I focus more on the user experience, the development, and obviously the working with customers.
So with that, I mean, is he actually having to, for example, like write plugins or write modules or anything like that to integrate with, Twitter and with Instagram and Facebook and all of those guys?
Yeah. So yes. And the reason for that is because obviously those guys use OAuth as their authentication connection, which is obviously when you click a button, it goes to their website, you log in, you come back. The way Bubble works is it supports that, but it only supports one OAuth account per Bubble account for each network. So obviously if you're a social media scheduler, you might have a client with 8 different Facebook accounts, and you can't have 8 different Bubble accounts because then it just becomes weird and nothing's linked.
Exactly.
So this was a horrendous discovery. And then Nigel found a really great way to offhand, I won't tell you exactly how it works, but offhand a lot of that work to Auth0, which is a kind of like a token storage and OAuth platform. So basically that would hold all of the tokens and networks and stuff like that. And then really we would just reference to that and back and forth, so that Bubble wouldn't be storing anything. And that Auth0 is a really secure enterprise grade platform that most companies
So then he just helped you build an integration from Bubble to Auth0 and then let it handle the rest of what it needed to do.
Exactly, yes. He built all the integrations for that. Really great job on that. And then he also did all the kind of bits and bobs, a little bit of user interface, designing the app, database structure, loads of bug fixing that I couldn't work out. And it was really great. You know, we just bounced ideas off each other as well. It wasn't just like I would pass him stuff. It was, as I said to him when we started, it was a team. We're both equal in it. So yeah, he would always give ideas, and we'd share ideas, and yeah, and it's continued still, and it's really, really great.
and so then I guess on that note, you kind of touched on the UX a little bit. You know, how did that kind of evolve? You said that you redesigned it 4 times.
Yeah.
You know, and so like how did you iterate through that process? Because I think that's one of the things that actually everybody is worried about that wants to get into no code is like, how do I make something that looks and functions, nice, right?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing I can say to that is you probably won't for the first launch. We've technically had 3 launches for Sendpilot, but the thing is, when you look it up, other SaaS companies have had 3-4 launches. Some have, I can't remember. I don't know. I won't name it just in case it's not true. But I was reading one social media company. They relaunched every month until people actually cared. So have launch emails, and they would keep doing all these product hunt things, and relaunch until like the 6th time they actually got traction and people coming in and using it. And that was kind of what we did. It's embarrassing in a way, but if you're not embarrassed by the first version of the product, you launch too late. Essentially, is a good saying.
Exactly.
So what the journey we had with Sendpilot, we built what I thought was a really nicely designed platform. People who I asked liked it. What we didn't do much of, and we'll touch on this later, I'm sure, is the testing side. So obviously when we used it, we fell down the trap of knowing, because we built it, we knew how things worked and what we should maybe stay away from. So subconsciously we would avoid performing actions in a certain order or clicking certain places or doing whatever, because we knew it would fall over. And kind of you get into that cycle of doing that mentally. So you push a new feature, yeah, it's awesome, it works, you test it, but then you forget that real people that don't know how it works, they're not going to do that. They're going to screw it all up over the other side, and it's all going to go wrong.
And then you give it to your first user and everything crashes and burns.
Yeah, well, we actually did worse than that. I mean, we launched a lifetime deal with a fantastic partner. We're still, great partners, great friends with them now, called Pitchground, which I think you bought our license through, if I remember. And we launched it. The first few comments were like, "Oh, this is awesome, really great." And like 2 weeks in, we were like getting comments like, "Everything is broken, nothing's working," things. And it was just, we realized at that point that we hadn't put in enough user testing, stress testing. We just hadn't anticipated some of the ways that people wanted to use it and were using it. And we were having problems come up that, we never imagined would have come up because of the way people were trying to use it, or they were trying to apply their thinking from Upper or other places. So we redesigned it, and then we ended up doing the same thing again because we didn't like it. I wasn't happy. And then, we've kind of got it much better from there, much more stable.
And on that note, on the launch side, it's also, I think launching a lifetime deal is a complete other discussion, right? About how, just from a launch strategy point of view. And I know, and this is something that code or no code, we've seen a lot of people, and I'm going to say probably most founders really struggle with doing that, because you just have this huge influx of users overnight, literally, right? Where, we had maybe a couple hundred users, and then all of a sudden we've got 20,000. It's like, wow, what do we do now, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's a good problem to have, especially when they're all paying. But it makes customer service hard. I dedicated a few days to really just sitting and going through stuff, and I wanted to. Because I come more from a business background and understanding of the customer and the personal side of it, I made sure that I was available on Facebook, and I didn't just funnel everyone through to intercom. If someone reached out to me on Facebook, I would get back to them on Facebook. I'd jump on a Facebook call, whatever, just to make that easier for them. Because if you can build, and this works really well for us, and make sure, if you try this, whoever's watching, make sure you put the customer and their feelings and building that relationship first. Because even if the product is really crappy when it first comes out, which in hindsight, ours was. In hindsight, when we first launched on Pitchground, I think it wasn't ready yet. And me and Nigel discussed that, and we agreed it wasn't quite where we wanted it to be. Towards the end of the campaign, it got much, much better. But because we built those really nice personal relationships with people, people invested in us as a team because we put the effort into have a call, have a demo, try and fix their issue. And that's what they're investing in, not the current iteration, the current version of the platform. They were investing in the future, and that future is still, it's becoming clearer now for people, and people are, we get messages all the time saying, finally, everything's really great. I'm really happy with it. You fulfilled the promises, blah, blah, blah. And it's taken a few months to get there, but with the LTD side, it's just one of those things.
Yeah, and I think that's something that regardless of whether you're no code or not, everybody kind of has those same problems. Yeah. So, it's just that, and I'm sure that in that LTD market, nobody's ready. Nobody can anticipate the questions that are going to come, the bugs they're going to find, the volume of support inquiries they're going to get. Right? It's just that's something that you're going to have to know that you're taking on, and you've got to be as ready as you can. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you've got to kind of swallow your pride with it. We get some. Unfortunately, we do get some unpleasant feedback sometimes, or more just insults generally. Sometimes people just want to.
It's a tough crowd.
Yeah, but that's what makes it so exciting and fundamental, because when you do get it right, you really get back what you put in. And if you don't bother putting in the work with the customers and that sort of thing,
course.
What I always say is that behind every criticism and insult, there's a real user that's paid their money and they want the value out of it. And if you can try and look past the mean way of putting it that they've used, there's some feedback there that you can kind of learn from and try and develop. Yeah.
Absolutely. Very cool. And so you had mentioned that you had to build some custom integrations, right, in order to actually get the posting to work. Are there any other third-party apps that you needed other than the one that you had mentioned that that got you to where you needed to be?
Yeah. We use a few different things. I mean, I won't name them just because it's not proprietary, but we have a certain system, a certain custom linkage of systems that allow us to do what we do. But yeah, we use a lot of, APIs in the industry that we work in, ways of, scraping content off of a website, then other ways of processing it, and then mixed in with our Bubble. I suppose you could call them algorithms, but
workflows.
Workflows. And the way we kind of do that, and we've got fail safe. So if a certain workflow fails to scrape off the information that we need, another one will kick in using a different API, and so forth, so that we're not just relying on one thing. We've got backup systems in place. It's kind of similar to a traditional development environment.
Absolutely.
Where you have fail safes that kick in only when you need them, to make sure that,
So is it that you kind of found multiple ways to solve a given problem and then said, okay, we're going to try this way, and if this fails, we're going to try this other way.
Yeah.
And that's how you kind of stitched it together?
Exactly, yeah. Because of the nature of what we do, and a lot of it comes from scraping a website. Obviously, websites, there's so many website builders, Wix, Shopify, all that stuff, and they all display content differently. They all have different ways of, different CMSs show data differently. So some scrapers won't actually pull off images, for example. So another one will kick in that we've got set up that for some reason can read it. We've got all these different ways of, if one thing fails, another one will try and come in and bring in the data that we need until we get to the point where we can verify everything's there that we need. Then we build the campaign. So that's why some things, it might take 30 seconds to write a campaign, whereas some people might go and expect us to click a button and that's it, they've got it there. And they're not happy to wait the 30 seconds. Right. 8 full social media posts, but it's just there's an education side as well, and depending on what industry you work in, you need to educate your customers through onboarding and all that sort of thing of
course. Just like any other app, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And then also, so obviously there've kind of been two of you working on this platform. Were you really working on it at the same time, or so if you're working at the same time, like how do you actually manage, how do you manage a multi-user environment? Because you don't really have things like branching and code commits and things like that when you're working at a platform like Bubble. So how does that really work with multiple users?
Yeah, it's tricky. So Bubble introduced the commit feature recently. Obviously it works slightly different to a traditional setup, but what I usually do what we do is it's just about communication really. So we'll make changes ourselves. We'll either use the deploy current session changes that we've made if it's just like minor hot fixes or whatever. But if it's a big upgrade that we're updating the whole app, I'll just drop a message to Nigel, say is it okay to deploy. He'll do one back if he's doing something. I mean, it's just that communication. Sometimes things go wrong and we push something and we didn't realize someone else had changed something and only halfway through the work, and then you have to fix that. But we've got to that point now where most things are stable. Unfortunately, what happens is the networks, social networks, they either change the way they process data, or
which happens constantly, right?
all the time. And the thing is, obviously, we're the service provider to the users. So if something goes wrong, and Google My Business was a big one recently, they changed loads of things, and then things weren't going out and problems were happening. But it makes us look bad. And obviously, we look like we've messed it up, but really we're trying to figure out, we get on the line to Google and say, what's going on? Why is nothing going out? And then they say, because they haven't got location set up or whatever.
And then you have to go through 12 people before you find somebody that knows what's going on.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, with Facebook as well, it's difficult as well. Exactly. We've had huge problems with that, but
well, and Twitter as well. I know that Twitter did a bunch of big updates, in the last 6 months or so, not just with the API, with the rules where after you post something, they're going to screen your post and determine, if it's acceptable, and all of that's new, right?
Yeah. And the thing is, what we found is if something does get rejected, and, obviously it's their network, they have every right to do it, but we don't get notified of that. So it's not like we'll push it to them and then they'll send an error code back saying, I didn't go out. It'll just be silent. Nothing will happen. And then we have to manually almost set up checks to try and really dig deep and find why they've rejected it. We kind of, it's us trying to get a multi-billion-dollar company to give us better error.
Which is not going to happen.
It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. So it's kind of finding ways of doing it.
Exactly.
Finding ways of doing it. And, all the other guys manage buffer and that sort of thing. They all manage with it. But
well, but those guys they're also big enough and old enough that I'm sure that they have lots of connections in networks, and they can make stuff happen whenever they need to make it happen. Yeah. And then if you're a small guy, then good luck, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's what we're trying to wrestle through. But so far everything's fine. Google My Business is playing up a little bit, but we're fixing that. But yeah, no, so far so good. It's just managing all of those expectations.
And I think that's kind of a good segue to kind of the next things that I wanted to dive into are what are some of your biggest pain points when building a no-code platform? And obviously with what you're talking about, third-party integrations is one of those, but I'm going to say that's kind of really specific to the social networks, because they do whatever they want to do and they change stuff all the time. But whenever you're dealing with more, I guess I should say maybe more typical integrations, whenever they're not changing something every week. Is there anything that you run into and you're like, wow, this was just really, really hard, or anything like that?
Yeah, I think. I'm trying to think of a good example. I mean, sometimes what we'll find is you set something up perfectly. It should, in theory, work. You deploy it, it doesn't work. You go back, change some things, try it again, it doesn't work. And then you change it back. And then for some reason you deploy it and it works all of a sudden. And it's kind of one of those things where you think, is this me, or is this the platform? And obviously there's a lot of real code and stuff working in the background beyond the surface layer, the user interface of Bubble. And the platform itself is unbelievable. I always drop an email to Emmanuel and all the team and say, great job, blah, blah, blah. But there are a few things here and there that,
quirks.
Yeah, quirks, limitations. For example, CNAME, we had a big sort of discussion about that on the forums, because we wanted to offer a white label service where people could CNAME their domain to our platform and then use their own domain for the app and all that sort of thing. And they don't support that unless you're on a dedicated plan, things like that, which is a little bit, if they get away from those things, it becomes less of a problem for us, and it becomes more of a dependable stack language, I suppose. And they get further and further away from that limitations of like a website builder or an app builder, and it becomes a real universal platform for actually building stuff that you can take and present to enterprise and say, look, you can connect your own domain and all that sort of thing. It's possible, but they just need to make it easier.
And then so, and you kind of touched on that a little bit, kind of the biggest challenge of using Bubble as compared to hand coding. And I think, but I mean, you touched on the example where there's just some quirks in the platform, but, I would argue that, if you've ever really gotten into coding, you'll run into the exact same thing, right? Where you wrote a thing, you deploy it, and it should work, and it doesn't. And then you spend the next 4 weeks trying to debug this thing, right? And then, so, I mean, we can look at it and say, oh, Bubble's got some quirks, but, in reality, that's how everything works, right?
Yeah.
So,
Exactly.
so I guess, on that note, I mean, is there anything you really look at, and you said, hey, if we had coded this would have been so much better?
I don't think there is. No, I think we put so much work into optimization, speed optimization, all that sort of thing. I mean, it would probably be worse if we'd coded it by hand, to be honest. I think Bubble's so fast to iterate. I mean, we have, like our customer service, for example, we've kind of become known for this in some of the groups, that people will report a problem and then within an hour, or sometimes literally like 10 minutes, I'll have pushed a fix for it.
And I did notice that too, kind of following those threads as you launched and kind of looking in there, and it's like, that's really, really agile, very agile bug fixing, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's so much easier to do it like that than traditional coding. And because especially when you really master it, you can go in and see, oh yeah, that's the exact problem right there. Just change that condition, change that filter, whatever. It takes 30 seconds and deploy it.
Right. And so there's probably no way that you could realistically change something like that if you did have to dive into the code and make that change. There's no way that you could make it that fast.
No, definitely not. No way. Yeah, definitely not.
And this is a question that a lot of people have asked about, no code platforms, and they're saying, is no code really some code? Like, are there some areas where you ever had to dive in and actually say, okay, we have to code this?
The only thing I can think of is some of the Pinterest, for example. We're working on Pinterest support, and their requirement requires the use of an SDK, so a software development kit.
And that's specifically just to integrate with Pinterest for posting, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's not the same as some of the other guys where it's just an API and you ping off the message as a whatever, as a parameter. There's a little bit behind that, and Nigel's he's actually taken up JavaScript lessons to kind of deepen his knowledge of that, so he can do it. But really, that's the only time we've had to do that. And then obviously with GoodWebinar, we're working with some WebRTC platforms. So GoodWebinar obviously is a webinar platform, webinar and Facebook live stream. Mm-hmm. So obviously we built the UX, the user interface, everything really, really nice on Bubble. And then to be able to use the webcam and audio and mic and all that sort of good stuff, we had to use Agora. And Agora's got like a software development kit, so that basically allows you to access the microphone and live stream it out. So there was a little bit of coding required there, but I brought someone else on who's really great at doing that to fix all those things.
And so how did you actually execute on that? What did you went and you looked in the Bubble plugin store and you said, hey, we don't have plugins for Pinterest. There's no plugin for WebRTC, so we're gonna have to make one, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and there's kind of that fear. You think, oh, we're gonna have to make it. We have to pay loads and loads of money. We found an amazing developer who helped us do it all. He integrated the whole streaming, so we can share screens, have multiple hosts, live stream, all that sort of thing. And that was just through the Bubble forums. So we put the post out asking for help on it, basically. Vetted a couple of people that applied, and he was the best one. And he had a proven track record of doing it before with Twilio as well.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, so we used it.
Well, and that's the great thing about it too, is that there's a big ecosystem of third-party developed plugins that do those exact things. So it makes it a lot easier.
Exactly, yeah, and I think more and more real hardcore developers are coming over to Bubble as well. If not for building their own apps, but more for just providing that support where designers and not super technical guys like myself, they can kind of come in and help people like me, where I can do all the design and user interface and build the stuff, but SDKs like that, they can do
fix the backends.
yeah, exactly, yeah, all that sort of thing that
very cool.
not everyone can do.
Yeah, so and I was just kind of going through all the rest of the questions that we had were kind of on the same vein on when do you have to write code versus when do you not have to write code. And I mean that's really the short answer is really only for some select integrations
Yeah.
did you have to touch that. So there's nothing on the user interface. There's nothing on you didn't have to touch it for Twitter
Nope.
or with Facebook or any of those guys, right?
No, no. I mean, we obviously set up the authentication, but if you just want to connect your Facebook, there's loads of plugins that do it. Yeah, I mean, the
Okay,
plugin
cool.
community is huge. Yeah, it's huge now.
And so, and we talked about this a little bit earlier in regards to testing.
Yeah.
And so, is there anything that you saw from the whole deployment launching process that you think would have made testing different had you made it on a had you coded it yourself versus had you made it on Bubble? Like, is there anything fundamentally different with the way that you would do user
Yeah.
testing or integration testing or anything like that?
Yeah. So I think for us, we have to be careful because it's so easy to make a change and then just push it. It's literally 2 clicks to deploy, and it's ridiculous. So you kind of fall into that trap of I fixed it. You know what? Let's just push it and hope for the best. And I think there's quite a funny post on the forum about that somewhere. Whereas previously you do obviously have to test it and whatever regression testing and all that kind of thing. But really, we kind of hot fix a lot of things. So a problem will come in, we'll fix it. We'll know, just through experience, we'll know it's going to fix it. We'll push it out. Sometimes, and this is a little bit cheeky, we'll even just say, yeah, it's fixed. And they'll test it and say, yeah, thanks for that. And we're like, did test it. But just because you've got that experience and you kind of built that up, that, just changing something is definitely going to fix something. It's bigger problems and stuff, we do. Nigel will do a lot of testing and obviously in development mode and all that sort of thing. But mini hot fixes, we'll just push it. The main problem we have actually is because we fix and push updates so much is the little banner that comes up on Bubble saying an update is required. Please refresh your page. And sometimes when we first launched, because we were doing so many updates, people were complaining that it was too often that they had to refresh. So I'm really looking forward to when Bubble just stop that and just background kind of update everything.
And so it's really just discipline on your part, right? Where you really kind of need to set try not to push so fast just because you can, but try to kind of batch your updates. Let's not push an update every 5 minutes, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We've got a more firmer development testing and deployment cycle now. Now we've matured a little bit more from those from that learning curve. And I think because obviously we're an international business, we've got customers all over the place, all over the world. It's not like we can say, right, we're going to deploy it, at 2 a.m. because that's someone's afternoon. So it's always going to interfere with someone. Really, it's just kind of figuring out when the possible best times and just hoping for the best. And if anyone flags it up, just apologizing, really.
And on that note too, and for anybody that knows kind of anything about full stack development, there's the idea of multi-tenancy whenever you're dealing with especially like global apps where you would effectively have certain regions or certain customers kind of in their own instance, and obviously you can do that with Bubble, but I don't know that you would want to, right? And so is there anything that that you've kind of run into that would even in the roadmap that would even kind of allow you to do something like that as you really start to scale?
I don't think there's anything on the Bubble roadmap. I think they have no refresh updates on there somewhere in the future. I don't know what their current position is on that. I know there's a really great zero code plugin. Levon and the other guys do a really great job at zero code, but they've got a plugin that allows it to update. I tried to use it. I just couldn't figure it out. I didn't give it enough time. It wasn't a slant on the plugin. I just didn't give it enough time to actually figure out how to use it. Because we've got so many elements that I think had to be nested in it or something. I'm not too sure, but
of course.
Well, yeah, there are solutions.
We have Levin in the group too, so maybe we'll get him to kind of dive into some of that, some of that a little bit more advanced stuff around and again around multi-tenancies and deployments and things like that are going to start to be an issue as you really start to scale. Because I know that you can absolutely upsize your servers, but at some point, if you have hundreds of thousands of daily active users, you're probably going to hit the limit on that and say, okay, we're going to have to do something else now, right?
Yeah. I think obviously they offer a dedicated plan on AWS, and I don't know how far that scales.
Mhm.
if you are seeing that. But, at that point where you've got hundreds of thousands of daily active users, you'd hope you'd be at a point where you've got the cash flow to actually just say, we're going to restack it.
Exactly.
You're
And at that
going
point,
to be
you probably want to redevelop it anyway, right? Because you're
exactly,
probably
yeah.
running into all sorts of limitations and bugs that you don't have a good solution for. And you're like, you know what? Scrap everything, rebuild it. We're
Yeah.
now on V11 of this product, and and let's go with
Exactly,
it,
yeah.
right?
I mean, if you're a SaaS company with hundreds of thousands of daily active users, you're gonna have some capital there to play with.
Unless they're all free users, in which case,
Yeah, yeah. But I hate the freemium model. I'm never going to do that. It's always free trial because you don't want to mess around with that.
Cool. Cool. And then next thing that I had in here is kind of on that note is about growth. So so you've done it. Is it better to kind of grow slow or do a fast ramp?
See, with Sendpilot, we did a fast growth. So we went from 0 to just over 2,000 users in around 3 months. Yeah, if only. But around 2-3 months, which is obviously not high growth for some companies, but for us and for a 2-man team, that was very high growth.
Well, for launching from 0, that's actually a lot. I think that what you see a lot of these fast growth companies, their fast growth doesn't start when they first open their doors and first start getting customers. That happens somewhere down the line whenever they start getting traction, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, a lot of those companies, you kind of just see the sudden peak where they go from next to nothing to suddenly being worth $1 billion, and they've got these people coming in. But you don't see the 5-6 years when they were founded in.
Exactly. Like Slack didn't start with a million active users, right? I mean, it was something that took a long time to start getting usage and traction, and then all of a sudden, now they're worth however many dollars they are now, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think with Slack, they were, I don't know if they were the first to do it, but they had that responsibility of educating everyone. And I read the founder's kind of bio on it, and when they launched, it was all email based and just kind of transactional emails. There was no real-time instant messaging in a business environment anyway. So not only did they have to launch the product and market it, but they also had to educate everyone, educate teams on why they needed it. And educating teams is a nightmare. I tried that with the project management software, and you can get one person on board, but getting a whole team to actually use it you need salespeople going in and really encouraging that. So that's where they stuck it out, and then obviously that's where they are now. But I wouldn't want to do that.
But we know it wasn't an easy ramp in the beginning as they were starting to do that. But then I think as soon as you get to that inflection point where everybody gets it and it just starts to click, right? And your user interface is awesome, and everybody gets on in 2 minutes. They're using it, right? That's that magic.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what everyone pushes for, and we're probably not going to get there yet. You probably won't for the first few years in any kind of, especially software as a service, because it's just so unique in what you do and the way your platform works. It's to you, if you've used, obviously when I jump into a new software company, a new SaaS company, I kind of know from experience, this is probably how it works. So I kind of get up to speed pretty quickly, but for normal agency owners or people that don't come from that side, it can be a learning curve. So that's why it can really take a while to build anything up.
Cool. And so whenever you got started, what were some of the best resources that you found that kind of helped you really get started? Did you take classes? Did you find blogs? Did you find, what did you work with?
I think I started with the Bubble tutorials first.
And those are the ones that are built into the app, right?
Yes, yeah. When you first sign up, those ones. I think I started it. Then I decided to say, I can't be bothered with this. And I stopped, and then I picked it up again a couple of weeks later and stopped again. And then I think it was on the third time I really thought, WordPress isn't working out. Let's just try this. Let's try and build it. So I think I went with those ones, creating and storing data, how workflows work. And then really it was just kind of coming up with an idea and then finding a solution for it in the forum. So I'd search through the forum, see if someone else had done it. Luckily, the forums and the products are at such an age where the Bubble forums have got those sort of answers, and someone has, 80% of the time done it before you. Or there are people that can just explain it really, really easily. Mm. So the forums are probably the best resource. Obviously, they've got the documentation, the searchable documentation as well, so you can kind of search for anything you don't understand. Of course. Just combining all of those together really helps. I mean, there's some great agencies as well, like Zero Code. Copilot has some good resources. CoBubble as well.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if they're called that anymore.
There's also a few, there's
yeah.
a couple of people that have launched trading on Udemy as well.
Yeah. There's so much educational resources. There's not really much of an excuse. It's just up to you. If you want to dive in and do it, you can do it.
But so your process is start the training, get bored, go build it yourself.
Yeah, in a weird way it was. I had to really get to that point where I thought I'm either going to have to pay a developer thousands and thousands to do it, or I'm just going to have to knuckle down, spend a few months doing it, and I'll have that freedom. And I think that's what I was looking forward to, that freedom of being able to just build whatever. And then I've also taught myself drop source as well, which is a little bit different in that you get the native Java or Swift code to then submit to the App Store, so you can actually keep the app you developed, which you can't with Bubble. But it's a similar concept in dragging and dropping and just storing data, and you can obviously connect it to a Bubble database as well, which works really well.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So kind of wrapping things up, I kind of have three more I guess I should say kind of more nebulous questions.
Yeah.
Is going forward, like especially if you're a high growth business, should you be investing your resources more into no-code solutions versus the traditional way?
Definitely. I think there's going to be a little bit of stigma around it in some forums, in some groups. Don't worry about that. I'd say push on. I mean, I think we were the first lifetime deal to launch with a Bubble app, which some people thought that was awesome. Some people were like, wait, well, you can't do that. But it's a solution, right? When you buy a house, you don't pay for the individual bricks, you pay for the end product, the end solution, which is the software. So just focus on that. Don't worry about how it's built. The original question has just slipped my mind, but yeah, just focus on building that solution, really.
Well, it was just about should you if you're going to go into this and either you're already a high growth business or you think you're going to be a high growth business, should you be going down this road, or should you be like, this isn't going to work for me, I need to go do it the old way?
Yeah, I think if you think you're going to be a high growth business, there's not going to be a way to prove that unless you've either got an MVP already, or you've got the funds to make it a high growth business no matter what stack you use. So I think for any normal business owner, for any normal entrepreneur, I know they even use it in some enterprise as well, just to test ideas. Build it in Bubble, see what happens, get it out, get that user feedback. And if you decide for whatever reason you want to restack later, at least you've got that initial foundation, the understanding of what people want. And then you can actually spend the money on building the real thing in code if you want to, and not building something that nobody wants in code and then having to do that whole process again and costing a lot more money. And just
like we talked about earlier, right? I mean, if you're going to go through 4, 5, 6 iterations of the product before anybody likes it, why don't you use something like Bubble where you can do it really, really fast?
Exactly.
Finally land on something where we're like, wow, we like this and we're going to use it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and there's no problem. We're going to stay with Bubble for the foreseeable future. With GoodWebinar, we're going to be live streaming HD video to many people concurrently, so at the same time. And we obviously the whole platform's built in Bubble, but we've got a CDN connected to like a content delivery network.
Very cool.
To make all that work. So there's always a solution. All within using Bubble, there's always a way to make it work, no matter how complicated or hard the tasks are. We've always found a way to do it.
And I don't want to put you on the spot on it, but with GoodWebinar, and for anybody who might be watching this later, it's currently middle of June 2019. From kind of what you're seeing, what do you think that you're going to be able to do launch-wise for GoodWebinar?
Good question. So this is quite interesting, and this is proof of how powerful Bubble is. I built GoodWebinar from nothing into validated, user-tested, user-approved design in 3 weeks.
Wow.
So that is how I built from nothing to the whole platform with WebRTC, everything integrated. It's taken us 3 weeks.
And so that's basically a 3-week MVP, effectively, right?
Exactly, yeah. But we've done it in such a way that the design is really, really great. We've shown the design to loads of people and who've all given really good feedback.
Awesome.
As opposed to like a really small pool of people. So yeah, and then when we're launching in a couple of weeks, I'd say. It's going to be an interesting one. I mean, I hope I don't know specifics on the numbers, but it's one of those things.
Of course.
Hunt to ship it. So
And so you're guessing maybe somewhere like 8 weeks ish from kind of first build to launch, right?
I'd say it's more about 6 weeks.
Wow.
5 to 6 weeks. Yeah, exactly. Obviously we've got a good team behind it, and we've sort of mastered it ourselves. So that's the reason why. But yeah, I mean, anyone can do it really.
Very cool. So fast forward a few years, do you think that especially most startups are going to be, gravitating towards no code solutions versus doing it the old way?
Yeah, I think so. Especially, the startup ecosystem is definitely moving that way. Obviously, Y Combinator are now taking more no-code startups in terms of actual startups built without code.
There's also a couple of hackathons, right, for no code, aren't there?
I think there are. Yeah, there's. I don't know the names of them specifically, but there's also meetups and Nigel. I think Nigel runs the London meetup, but they've got them all around the world, around the US,
Absolutely.
and there's such a big community around it as well. It's not. I suppose it used to be kind of a really indie niche thing. I suppose just like programming in a way. But it's becoming a lot more popular, and the stigma around it is really getting less and less, and you're seeing real commercial apps, or the start of a commercial app launching with a no-code.
Yeah, the analogy that I had always that I would always kind of used for it is, even if you go back and you look at you look at developers. I mean, all of the developers in the modern day, they all use frameworks, and they use frameworks because it's fast, because all the stuff's already done for them. They pick it up, they use it, and if you were to go to them and say, well, why aren't you writing this in binary, or why aren't you writing this in assembler? Like you are crazy, right?
Exactly.
But like what we're doing with no code, that's just another layer on top of the idea of using libraries, where all of the stuff's already built for you. You've already got, effectively a UI builder. You've already got a database. You already have connectors, and it's just a visual editor instead of being a bunch of libraries that you're running, in a Java class, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly that. It's like how low do you expect a developer to go? Do you want them to build the whole computer and then write all the machine code binary, and it's like, how low do you want them to get?
Exactly.
Before you're happy that you've built something commercial ready. It's
codey enough, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's one of those things. It's just people that have got nothing, to, if they don't understand it, there's that temptation to worry about it. But once you really get into it, there's no limitations on what you can do.
Very cool. And then, final question that I've got is, what are your number one tips to launching a no-code app?
Oh, okay. I got quite a few. Patience. I think that's, with any startup is patience. It's really tempting to go from one idea just to move on. But what you'll find is you'll keep doing that, and you might be able to, sell a template or whatever. But if you really focus on something, you can then build that monthly recurring revenue and really grow it and scale it. And also you can, what people don't understand is with having your own business or no-code startup is, people are happy to work all their lives for another company for X amount of salary, yet they're not happy to work for 6 months, and they'll give up after a year of 6 months because they're not making enough money. And then they'll go back to that job where they're still not making enough money, but they haven't got the freedoms that they had being an entrepreneur. And it's a weird kind of paradigm of, what do you want to do? Do you want to have that freedom in the future and invest that? Or do you just want to go and get an easy job and still work for someone else and not make enough money as you want? So that's kind of the way I see it. Other no-code stuff. So, don't deploy too much. Have a proper development and deploy cycle from the beginning. Any developers out there probably hate me for not having one initially, but.
And now, what does that really mean for you? If you were to do that again, what would that mean? That you do daily, or you do twice a day max, or like, what would that really look like?
I think just a structure. So, we'll dedicate X amount of time to testing it, and then say, right, we're going to queue all of the updates that we've done, all the minor hot fixes that we would have just pushed randomly. We're going to put them into a big update, and then we'll release an update and say update 10.1.1 blah blah blah. As a mature company would, if you start off on those foundations, which we're doing now, if you start off from that as you mean to go on, that's a really good way of kind of going about it. Third top tip is don't start from scratch. Zero Code have got an amazing library. I should get commission for that. But Zero Code have got an amazing library of really good templates that will just get you started. If it's like an instant messaging app or whatever, social network, just go from that. You can jump in with that, change the design, change the layout, and really just get to market as quickly as possible. Don't try and rebuild the thing from scratch, because they've put the hard work in. Just validate your idea first and then build up and build up and build up. Do you want one more, or is that enough? I'm trying to think of. Let's have a think. I've got so privacy rules are really important. The privacy rules, so they're important for two things. Obviously, one, security, GDPR, all that stuff. You've got to be careful you're not accidentally exposing user data. But one of the biggest issues we found when we've had bugs and stuff is we'll go through every workflow, like kind of really go through everything with a kind of fine-tooth comb to try and fix it, and then realize at the end that we've got a privacy rule that just prevents X from accessing Y, and it would just been unticking that checkbox and just fixes the whole thing. And you might have spent 2-3 days trying to debug it. I've built stuff, rebuilt stuff like 2-3 times trying to fix it, and then Nigel's come in and said it's just a privacy rule that needs changing. And it's like, add that to your list of things to check when you're debugging. I'd actually put it as a priority, is check privacy rules first, then kind of go through everything and see.
And now when you're talking about privacy rules, you're talking about a specific bubble feature that does this?
Yeah, okay. Yeah. And so the bubble, basically there are a set of server rules that are looked at on the server side to evaluate whether the user has the permissions to view that piece of data. So maybe it's an email address or a photo or whatever. And sometimes if you've not got the right permissions because you've set it up wrong, a certain action won't work because it's not allowed to actually access that bit of data, or the person can't see it because they don't have permission. But it's a minefield. It really is.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Did you have anything else that you wanted to add? Do you have any other tips or any other advice that you can offer people other than just get up and do it?
It's kind of like a Gary Vaynerchuk kind of thing, isn't it? It's just literally just get up and do it, test it, build it, and ship it. And you're gonna fall over. People are gonna say things, but all you have to do is just keep developing it, and then you'll end up with a really great product, whether that's a no-code product or code product. I would say go to market strategies that we really like is product hunt. Get on those kind of beta lists and that sort of thing. And then if your platform is really kind of market ready, learn from the mistakes that we have with Sendpilot. But once you've really got it to that point where everyone's happy with it, then you can start to look at lifetime deals, and because that's a springboard for companies that are ready.
Awesome. I don't know, that's the launch conversation is a completely separate conversation that we could probably spend a good hour on, right? About how you do a kind of a quote unquote proper launch strategy, or a launch strategy that works to try to get traction and milestones. But that's a much bigger thing to talk about.
Yeah. I mean, we'll be here all night doing that, but yeah.
Exactly. And I don't think that anybody's actually really mastered that, except for probably the really big, the really big companies who have the brand recognition. So if Slack launches something on Product Hunt, of course they're going to be number one, right? Yep. Because they're Slack, and that's, that stuff is a no-brainer. But if you're starting and you're somebody who's relatively unknown, I don't know that anybody has really said, they've got a secret formula for being able to launch an unknown company into somebody, into basically a household name. It seems like it's very, very much kind of random chance that somebody, somebody interesting stumbles on your product and goes, wow, this is really cool. And then they'll go write about it in, TechCrunch or something like that, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's that's what you aim for. Hasn't happened for us yet, I don't think. Have a look at the press pages, but I don't think so. But yeah, that's what we aim for. And that's like any startup. You've got to just hope you get to that point.
Yep, and I think a lot of it's hard work and a lot of it's luck, right?
Yeah, it's just hard work, determination, and not giving up when you get distracted. Just give yourself a day, whatever, build something different, and then just refocus. It's a really great way to refocus, and that especially with Bubble, because you can just do it quickly, and then go back onto your project.
Excellent. Well, this was really great, and it worked out the format and everything worked out really well. So I appreciate your time. This was, I think everybody's going to love this. And what we'll do is we're going to drop, we're going to drop the links to Sendpilot. We're going to drop links to GoodWebinar and any other resources that you want to add, send them over to me, and then we'll put those in here. So whenever we post the video, that will have all of that, available. And if you have any other, anything else that you want to add, absolutely feel free to reach out, and we'll do it.
Fantastic. Yeah, I mean, looking forward to all the feedback and the comments that come in, and I'll try and jump in and answer them as they come up. But yeah, no, thank you for having me.
Awesome. Thank you, Reece. You have a great one.
And you too. Cheers.